Turning 30 does not mean you finally figure life out. Sometimes, it is the moment you realize how much of your life was built around expectations you never questioned. You may have a career, relationships, responsibilities, and achievements, yet still wake up wondering whether this is actually the life you wanted. Nobody sees the uncertainty behind your confidence. In your 20s, having questions feels normal. In your 30s, those same questions can suddenly feel like evidence that you made the wrong choices. Everyone seems to have reached a destination, while you are reconsidering the map. You watch former classmates buying homes, raising families, becoming successful, or traveling the world. Then one evening, you look at your own life and wonder why your progress feels smaller than it should. But psychology reveals something deeper. Your 30s often become a psychological turning point, where identity, priorities, relationships, and time begin demanding more honest answers. You start noticing which ambitions actually belong to you. That realization can be uncomfortable because choosing yourself sometimes means disappointing others. Beneath this is a psychological shift people rarely prepare for. Once you understand what your 30s are doing to your mind, the confusion begins to make sense. If you have reached your 30s feeling uncertain, disappointed, or behind, this video is not here to tell you that you should have done more. It is here to help you understand yourself. You will discover why choices feel heavier, why comparison becomes harder to ignore, why careers can lose their meaning, and why relationships often reveal parts of yourself you previously overlooked. These experiences are understandable. You may be carrying responsibilities that did not exist before, while trying to understand what kind of person you want to become. Perhaps you expected adulthood to bring certainty, only to discover better questions. There is no shame in changing direction, questioning old ambitions, or admitting that something you once wanted no longer feels right. Growth begins when you stop defending an outdated version of yourself. The 30s can become a period of self-knowledge because endless possibilities gradually become real choices. That can feel like loss, but it can also create clarity because you begin deciding what deserves your energy. And the first lesson begins with something uncomfortable. As you get older, your mind can start interpreting possibilities as deadlines. Understanding why that happens can change how you see every decision ahead. Turning 30 can make possibility feel like a countdown. Choices that once seemed open-ended suddenly appear attached to invisible deadlines, and your mind starts treating decisions as permanent. This happens because adulthood shifts attention toward commitment. In your 20s, you can imagine becoming almost anything. In your 30s, responsibilities make certain paths harder, so your brain notices what might be lost. You may hesitate before changing careers because starting again feels like admitting failure. You may stay in a relationship because leaving feels like throwing away years. You may abandon a dream because you believe there is not enough time. Psychologists studying decision-making have found that perceived scarcity can intensify pressure. When something feels limited, the mind can exaggerate importance. Suddenly, a birthday becomes a deadline instead of another day. Imagine sitting at home after seeing someone announce an achievement online. Nothing about your circumstances changed, yet you feel late. That feeling is real, but it does not mean your conclusion is true. What actually matters is recognizing that fewer possibilities do not mean fewer meaningful possibilities. Maturity is choosing which doors deserve attention. Once you accept that, comparison becomes the next psychological trap waiting around the corner. Comparison changes when the people around you stop feeling like peers and start feeling like evidence. Their achievements can become measurements against which your own life appears successful, unfinished, or late. In your 20s, seeing someone succeed may inspire you. In your 30s, the same announcement can trigger a different question. Why are they there while I am still figuring things out? Psychology calls this comparison. The problem becomes stronger when society creates an imagined timeline. Marriage by a certain age, financial stability, leadership at work, property ownership, children, and success can begin feeling like requirements instead of possibilities. Imagine opening your phone after an ordinary day and seeing 3 former classmates celebrating promotions, weddings, and new homes. You were content 5 minutes earlier. Suddenly, your progress feels inadequate. Social media intensifies this because you rarely see uncertainty, debt, arguments, failed applications, or disappointments. You see outcomes, then compare them with your unfinished process. That comparison can make life feel like failure. What actually matters is measuring your life against your values rather than someone else's timeline. Your 30s are not a race with one finish line. Even your phone eventually needs charging, so your life deserves a pause too. Your career can feel different in your 30s because work stops being about earning money and starts becoming part of the story you tell yourself about who you are. You may have spent years building experience, gaining promotions, and becoming good at something. Then one morning, you realize being good at your job does not mean you still want the life surrounding it. This is where the sunk cost effect can influence decisions. When people invest time and money into something, they often feel pressure to continue because they have already invested so much. Imagine someone who has spent 8 years in a career they dislike. They receive another promotion and everyone celebrates, yet they wonder whether accepting it means becoming trapped. Walking away feels terrifying because those years feel wasted. But previous years are not wasted simply because your direction changes. They gave you skills, relationships, experience, and information. Sometimes, discovering what you do not want is part of discovering what matters. What actually matters is whether your present direction still deserves your future. Changing careers at 30 does not erase your history. It means using what you learned to make an honest decision, even if your resume disagrees. Your 30s can change your relationships because you become less willing to confuse familiarity with genuine connection. Time alone no longer feels like enough reason to keep someone close when the relationship repeatedly leaves you drained. Friendships can become quieter as careers, marriage, children, relocation, and responsibilities reshape daily life. Some people you once spoke with every day may become occasional contacts, while others suddenly feel deeply important because emotional understanding matters more. Romantic relationships can also become more revealing. Attachment patterns often influence how people respond to closeness, conflict, reassurance, and distance. With greater self-awareness, you may notice whether you are choosing someone because they fit your values or because being alone feels frightening. Imagine meeting an old friend after several years and realizing you have little in common anymore. There may be sadness, but there is also freedom in admitting that people can grow in different directions without either person being wrong. What actually matters is building relationships where honesty, respect, emotional safety, and mutual effort can exist together. You do not have to preserve every connection simply because it has history. Sometimes maturity means accepting that your contact list needs therapy more than once these days. One of the changes in your 30s is the way time stops feeling like scenery and starts feeling measurable. Birthdays carry questions about where you should be. You notice your age when another year passes, when someone younger gets promoted, or when relatives ask about marriage, children, money, or plans. The calendar gets louder. Psychologically, time pressure can influence decisions because scarcity makes the mind focus on what seems limited. Instead of asking what you want, you may ask how quickly you can catch up. Imagine waking up on your birthday feeling content, then receiving messages from relatives asking what you have accomplished since last year. Nothing about your life changed, but progress feels inadequate. Healthy urgency can motivate action, but panic produces decisions designed to silence fear. You might accept the opportunity, rush into a relationship, or chase money because you feel time disappearing. What actually matters is using time as information, not as a weapon against yourself. Your 30s are not a countdown toward failure. They remind you that your attention is valuable, and choosing carefully matters. Besides, if birthdays were performance reviews, most of us would request a second opinion from human resources before accepting the rating. One of the quietest changes in your 30s is discovering that approval feels less satisfying than it once did. You begin questioning whether certain goals actually belong to you or simply reflect what others expect from them over time. In your 20s, status can feel like proof that you are progressing. A better title, expensive clothes, impressive relationships, or visible achievements can provide temporary reassurance, but external validation rarely creates lasting satisfaction. Psychology distinguishes intrinsic motivation from extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from personal meaning and genuine interest, while extrinsic motivation depends more heavily on rewards, recognition, or approval. As priorities mature, that difference becomes harder to ignore. Imagine receiving an opportunity that looks impressive to everyone around you, yet privately feeling nothing. 10 years earlier, you might have accepted immediately. Now, you wonder whether success is worth the lifestyle attached to it. What actually matters is choosing goals that reflect your values, even when they disappoint people who expected a different version of you. Maturity sometimes means becoming comfortable with being misunderstood. And there is something strangely liberating about reaching an age where impressing everyone sounds exhausting. Eventually, even your social battery starts demanding boundaries before your phone does. Responsibility can quietly change the definition of freedom in your 30s. Your decisions may no longer affect only you, because partners, children, parents, finances, and future plans can all become part of the equation. This can create emotional overload. You may spend your day answering messages, solving problems, planning expenses, managing work, supporting family, and making countless small decisions. Even ordinary choices can begin feeling surprisingly heavy. Psychologists describe decision fatigue as the decline in mental energy that can happen after making many decisions. When your attention is constantly divided, you may crave simple routines, avoid difficult conversations, or postpone choices that deserve thoughtful attention. Imagine finishing work and wanting an hour alone, only to remember bills, family responsibilities, household tasks, and tomorrow's schedule. You are not ungrateful. You are simply carrying more mental weight than before. What actually matters is remembering that responsibility does not require abandoning yourself. Healthy responsibility includes boundaries, rest, asking for help, and protecting enough space to remain connected with your own needs. The funny part is that adulthood can make choosing dinner feel like a strategic meeting, because apparently deciding between rice and pasta sometimes requires a full risk assessment before making another decision. Money becomes psychologically different in your 30s because it stops representing only freedom and starts representing safety. Rent, savings, family responsibilities, career uncertainty, and future plans can make financial decisions feel emotionally heavier than before, when others depend on you. You may compare your income with friends, feel embarrassed about debt, or believe a higher salary would finally make you secure. Yet behavioral science shows people often adapt to improved circumstances, meaning satisfaction can rise temporarily before expectations rise again. Imagine receiving a pay increase and celebrating for a week, only to notice your lifestyle quietly expands. Suddenly, the apartment feels smaller, the old phone feels outdated, and the savings goal moves farther away. Nothing ever really seems quite enough. What actually matters is understanding what money means emotionally to you. Is it safety, freedom, status, approval, control, or relief? Recognizing that connection can help separate needs from pressures created by comparison, fear, and expectation around adulthood and social pressure. The strange part is that adulthood can turn a bank balance into a personality test, as if your account statement has somehow become qualified to judge your entire existence. Sometimes, even your wallet starts giving unsolicited life advice today, too. Your 30s can become a mirror because distractions that once kept you moving may stop working. You begin noticing patterns in your reactions, relationships, choices, and fears that you previously blamed on circumstances around you before. Maybe you realize you constantly seek approval before trusting your decisions. Perhaps you avoid difficult conversations, overwork whenever you feel insecure, or become perfectionistic whenever failure threatens your sense of worth. These patterns rarely disappear simply because you get older. Psychology calls this greater self-awareness, and it can be uncomfortable because awareness removes excuses. You start seeing that some problems are not entirely caused by difficult people, bad timing, or unlucky circumstances. Sometimes your responses also deserve honest examination. Imagine receiving criticism at work and immediately becoming defensive. Later, you realize the criticism touched an old insecurity about competence. That discovery can hurt, but it also gives you something powerful. the ability to respond differently the next time around. What actually matters is learning to observe yourself without turning every weakness into a verdict. Self-awareness should create curiosity, not shame. Honestly, discovering patterns can feel like finding out your brain has been running secret meetings without inviting you. Loneliness in your 30s can feel strangely invisible because your life may look full while your emotional world feels increasingly quiet. You can have colleagues, relatives, a partner, and hundreds of contacts, yet still feel unknown. As responsibilities grow, friendships often become harder to maintain. People move, marry, raise children, change careers, or become exhausted by schedules. Conversations that once happened naturally now require planning, and spontaneous connection becomes surprisingly rare. Psychological research distinguishes social contact from meaningful connection. Being around people can reduce isolation temporarily, but deeper well-being often depends on relationships where you feel understood, accepted, and able to speak honestly without performing a successful version of yourself. Imagine spending a weekend surrounded by people, laughing, answering messages, and attending events, then returning home feeling strangely empty. Nothing was obviously wrong. You simply missed being genuinely known, rather than merely being socially present. What actually matters is building relationships where emotional honesty can survive busy seasons. You do not need hundreds of friends. You need people with whom silence feels comfortable, and your struggles do not require an explanation. And yes, making plans in your 30s can feel like negotiating a treaty, because everyone needs confirmation before dinner. One of the hardest lessons of your 30s is accepting that you cannot become every version of yourself you once imagined. Every choice creates another path you will not experience, and that can produce grief. You may wonder what life would look like if you had chosen another career, moved abroad, married someone different, started earlier, or pursued the dream you abandoned. Psychologists describe this as counterfactual thinking, where the mind imagines alternative outcomes. The problem begins when imagined lives become comparisons with your one. The alternative always looks cleaner because you remove its uncertainty, sacrifices, disappointments, and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Your brain compares reality with a fantasy edited without consequences. Imagine seeing someone living the life you once wanted. For a moment, you may believe they became the person you should have been, but you are seeing their outcome, not the story behind it. What actually matters is accepting that a meaningful life requires choosing, and choosing means leaving possibilities behind. Limitations are not proof that life is smaller. They can give your attention direction and your decisions meaning. Besides, trying to live every life would be exhausting. Eventually, even your imaginary selves would start complaining about scheduling conflicts. Your 30s become easier when you stop treating your life like a schedule everyone else received. There is no universal deadline for success, love, money, confidence, or discovering what you want. Some people build careers early, then change direction later. Others find relationships after years alone. Some become parents, some do not. Others restart after discovering that their first definition of success never belonged to them. Psychological flexibility becomes important here. It means adjusting your thoughts, expectations, and actions when circumstances change without losing connection with your values. That flexibility allows you to accept reality without surrendering your ability to grow. Imagine someone who believed they would own a home by 30, lead a company by 35, and have everything organized by 40. Life takes a route. Instead of seeing that as failure, they create goals that fit their circumstances. What actually matters is building a timeline that reflects your values rather than someone else's expectations. Maturity is not reaching every milestone quickly. It is learning to adapt when life changes while continuing toward what matters. And honestly, adulthood becomes calmer when you stop treating every birthday like a software update that should install a better version of yourself. Turning 30 is not the end of possibility. It is often the beginning of choosing more deliberately. You have learned that comparison distorts reality, responsibility changes freedom, and success means little when it belongs to someone else's definition of success. You have also learned that careers can change, relationships can evolve, Money can carry emotional meaning, and self-awareness can reveal patterns you once ignored. None of these discoveries mean you are behind. They simply mean you are becoming honest. Your 30s may contain uncertainty, but uncertainty does not have to become panic. You can change direction without erasing your past. You can build new relationships without betraying old ones. You can pursue ambition while protecting what genuinely matters most. What actually matters is becoming someone who can make thoughtful choices, accept limitations, adapt to change, and keep growing without measuring your life against another person's timeline. You do not need everything figured out. You simply need to keep becoming. If this video gave you a new perspective, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Someone else may need to hear what you discovered here. Your 30s are not a deadline. You still get to write it.